Good morning and welcome to Christ the Rock's YouTube channel. This is our weekend message series and my name is Jason. We've started a new series, haven't we, on hope, and we posed the question at the beginning of the series, what is our hope for this year? And maybe as you've listened to the news this week or read the internet or read newspapers, if that's such a thing as people do these days, you would have sensed there is that glimmer of hope as there's announcements of an actual plan of how we may be going out of lockdown, a plan of when the schools would return, a plan when we could maybe sit and meet more than one person in a park for a picnic or whatever. A plan that we are slowly moving out of this lockdown. And I'm sure for many of us that was an answer to all those hopes and dreams that we have been having over the last 18 months. So today we're continuing our series. This is number 3 in our series, and we're looking at the hope of blessing. And we're looking at this whole subject in the book of John. And today I'm going to be looking over a particular well-known miracle. In fact, this miracle was of such magnitude that it's actually recorded in all the 4 Gospels. And I'm sure it's a well-known miracle that most of us would be able to recite off by heart. So let's read it. It's found in John chapter 6 and verses 1 to 14. And it's titled, Jesus Feeds the 5,000. So after Jesus had crossed over to the far side of Galilee, as known as the Sea of Tiberias, a huge crowd kept following him wherever he went because they saw his miraculous signs as he healed the sick. Then Jesus climbed a hill and sat down with his disciples around him. It was nearly time for the Jewish Passover celebration. Jesus saw the huge crowd of people coming to look for him. Turning to Peter, he asked, "Where can I buy bread for these people?" Now he was testing Philip, because he had already knew what he was going to do. Sorry, I think I said Peter, but it's actually Philip. Philip replied, "Even if we worked for months, we would not have enough money to feed them." And then Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Well, there is a young boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 fishes. But what good is that for a huge crowd like this?" Jesus said, "Tell everybody to sit down." So they all sat down on the grassy slopes. There were about 5,000 men. Then Jesus took the loaves, he gave thanks, and he distributed it to the people. Afterwards, he did the same with the fish, and they all ate as much as they wanted. After everyone was full, Jesus told his disciples, "Now gather up the leftovers, and so that nothing is wasted." So they picked up the pieces, and they filled 12 baskets with scraps left over by the people who had not eaten from the 5 barley loaves. When the people saw him do these miraculous signs, they exclaimed, "Surely he is the prophet we have been expecting." Then Jesus saw that they were ready to force him to be their king. He slipped away into the hills by himself. What a tremendous story of hope that brings, a hope of blessing. And that's what I want to look at this morning, just for a couple of minutes, the hope of blessing. So let's just set the scene a minute. There's a large crowd who had been following Jesus now for several days, listening to his teaching. It actually states in some accounts that Jesus tried to get away for some rest. You can imagine, I'm sure he was tired. But the crowds kept pressing on him deeply to listen to more of his teaching, to see more of his miraculous signs. And the fact that Jesus didn't just slip off and decide to have a rest really, to me, shows that deep, amazing compassion Jesus has for his people. Now, these people may have not eaten for many days because, as I said, they were following Jesus. They were tired, they were hungry. And I guess it would be true to say that these crowds had hoped that they would get something to eat. The disciples had probably hoped that the crowds would go away, or Jesus would provide some solution by pulling off some miracle of some kind in order to feed them. Bearing in mind, they had seen miraculous miracles beforehand. They had seen the miraculous turning of water into wine at the wedding of Cana. So when you read this account, you understand that this miracle gives us such hope, a real hope of blessing, which is found when we hand over our problems, our difficult situations, something that is seems so unsurmountable. When we hand these over to Jesus, these problems, these situations, our needs to him, we will find great hope. 1 John 4 verse 4 says a great truth, a reminder of a great truth. It says, greater is he who is in us than he who is in the world. And speaking of Jesus, greater is he, Jesus, that is in us than he, us, who is in the world. So let's look a little bit more at 4 solutions that were offered to solve this vast problem they had of how do we feed this crowd. You see, we know from maybe when we were at Sunday school and even now, we know this miracle as the feeding of the 5,000, but in reality, it says there were 5,000 men. So let's just say each of these men had a wife. That's another 5,000, so that now is 10,000. And I'm sure many of these couples would have had 2 or 3 children. So some philosophers and scholars actually say in reality, it's the feeding of around 15,000 people. So what was the first solution? The first solution was they hoped the problem would go away. The disciples had suggested, let's send the crowds away. But Jesus was having none of that. You know, it shows his compassion, as we said earlier, his compassion for the people. He would not let them go away without any food because he knew after the couple of days that they had, they would probably faint or become ill. And Jesus was having none of that. And you see, that is quite a simple solution when you say, get rid of the problem. They had hoped that the issue would go away, but Jesus knew that they would be hungry. How often, when we're faced with a problem, is our first and natural thought to think, I hope it would go away? And I'm sure if I asked 100 people today, 99%, if not 100 people would say, we just hope this pandemic would, or this lockdown, or these restrictions would go away. And I guess the question is that right or not? Because for me personally, I would hope it would go away. But I guess the question is more, should that be our first instinct? I believe, yes, we should acknowledge there's a problem. But I also believe that one of our first instincts should be, once we've acknowledged there is a problem, is to turn to Jesus for the solution, to help us through this crisis. You know, Jesus, even though Jesus was tired, he had compassion for his people. He saw the need and he wanted to meet their need. You see, the second solution, this came from Philip in response to a very test question that Jesus had asked him. Where can we buy some food? Now, bear in mind, Jesus already knew the answer before he'd even asked Philip this. Now, Philip had worked this out in his head. I don't know if he did it in his head, but he worked it out very quickly, that in order to feed this vast amount of people, they would need the equivalent of nearly a year's wages. In fact, I think it says in some translations, it was 200 days' wages to feed that vast crowd. Now, the disciples didn't have that amount of money, and there was no way they were going to be able to get that kind of money together. But you see, Jesus here was testing Philip's faith. And I love Jesus. I love the way Jesus has involved his disciples in this problem. How many times has Jesus involved us, his disciples, his apprentices, into solving many of the world's or our community's crises? The other point I wanted to say here is, how often do we think money is the answer to all our problems? Now, and I speak for myself included, I'm sure if any of us were offered more money, an increase in salary, more benefits, more child allowance, whatever it may be, none of us would turn it down. Because it is true to say, money does help us along our way. But is money the answer to all our problems? I love that wonderful testimony last week from Marcus, how he wanted a bike to do this challenge as he turns the real young age of 40. And you know, I'm sure Marcus could have scraped together the money. I'm sure if he really wanted to, he probably could have took out a loan, or he could have saved here, or got rid of the car, or something. In reality, he probably could have got the money. But that wasn't his first response, was it? And what's encouraged me was Marcus's first response was to give it to God, to pray to God and say, Lord, if this is your will, we ask somehow that you will provide. And what a miraculous story it was how the Lord provided. And I have wonderful testimonies myself how in times of need, financial need, we have cried out to God, and right at the last minute, God has come through with the finances we need. I remember I wanted to go to Burkina Faso, my first ever mission trip, and we sat down for the trip, the orientation before, and it was discussed of how much money we would need to raise, and my heart sank, and I thought, gosh, at that time I just started my business and finances wasn't brilliant, and I cried out to God and say, Lord, if this is your will, then I need a miracle from you. And you know what? I can't remember if it was the next day, but it was certainly that week. I had a letter arrive in the post from the Inland Revenue, and it was a cheque because I had overpaid on some tax on some previous years. And you know what? The money that came back to the penny almost, was the exact money I needed to go to Burkina Faso. Wow, I love Jesus when he comes clean right at the very end, doesn't he? He really tests our faith, and so often it's true to say that he wants us to rely on him first for our hope. I think of these wonderful charities like Food Bank and CAP. Now I'm sure they could solve all the problems of people without food and all the people without debt if they had bundles and bundles and oozes of money and just gave out money here and gave out money and solved every problem. But is that the right way to do it? No. CAP tried to help people to be able to manage their finances, manage their money. Food Bank alike. You know, they could probably give out low checks to everybody to help them have food. But is that the right method? No, they want to help people to be able to manage their money, to cook more from less. And that's just a wonderful way of proving that actually money is not always the right answer. The third solution we find comes from Andrew. Now, he was the one that found the little boy with the 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Now, I have to ask myself the question, how on earth, in a crowd of 15,000 people, did Andrew manage to find this little boy with his small packed lunch of 5 loaves and 2 fishes? That, to me, is another miracle in itself, and I don't know how that happened, but you've got to say that was God in some way. He found some glimmer of hope for these people, but again, Andrew found a solution, but he had no idea how to put the solution into practice, into reality. How often have we believed that we found a solution to a problem or an issue and not really had an idea of how it would really work? I know I have. I've come up with these thoughts and these ideas and think, yeah, that would be brilliant. Yeah, that would be great. That would work. But in reality, I've not been able to articulate how to turn that vision, that thought, that solution into a practice. You sense, don't you, that Andrew was a real people's person. And if you read some of his accounts in the other Gospels, you see that he was really able to get amongst the people and talk to them and be a real people's person. And I love that. I love that attribute about from Andrew. Sorry. So what I love also about this lad, and this is the important bit, what I love about what this lad is, he came with what he had. And sometimes that's all God expects of us, to come before him with what we have, with all we have. You see, because he can use what we bring to him for a hope of blessing to others. You see, I think it's more about that obedience, being obedient by coming to him with what we have. Whatever you have, my suggestion is we just give it to Jesus. You know, Jesus can do a lot with a little, and there's many miracles in the Bible. We can see this. Jesus can do abundance with a little. You know, let's not spend our time concentrating on what we don't have. You know, how often do we think, well, I'm not a good musician, or I can't play the guitar, so there's no way I can be in the worship band, or I'm, you know, and I've often thought this myself even, you know, I don't profess to be a great speaker, I don't profess to be, you know, a great teacher, and I'm always doubting myself, and I'm always questioning myself all the time, just before I come to do one of these talks, and think, am I really that good enough? I haven't got the knowledge, I haven't been to university, I haven't been to Bible college for 4 years, so how can I bring anything to the people of Christ the Rock with a word of encouragement? But my heart is, you know, and all I do is I stand before you humbly this morning, and I just give you what I have, and I just hope and pray that you find it a blessing. So I'd encourage you, come to Jesus with what you have. And also the other point I want to make about this little lad, it's fantastic that Jesus didn't use an adult, didn't use a scholar, didn't use a prophet, didn't use someone, a businessman or someone all-powerful. He used a child to bring blessing to the hundreds of people in this crowd. And there's a lesson there, isn't there? And I'm sure there's another sermon there or another talk, how Jesus can use children or youngsters or teenagers to bring blessing to others. So if you're a youngster or a teenager who are listening today, don't think you have nothing to offer to God. Be encouraged this morning. What you have, whether you're good at dancing, whether you're good at playing the guitar, whether you can play, whatever you can do, whether you can sing, Jesus can use you this morning. Jesus can use your talents and gifts. All you have to do is bring it to him. And the fourth solution, and with this I'm drawing to a close now. The fourth solution came from Jesus himself. And this is the one and truly only solution, isn't it? He took the little boy's lunch. And let's read this little bit. He took the little boy's lunch. And this is an important bit. He blessed it. Doesn't that give you encouragement that whenever we have something from God, we ask God to bless it? We give thanks in the very first instance. So he blessed it. And that's what God encourages us to do. Then he broke it. And then he handed it to his disciples. And they fed the crowds. And as we remember from the story, there was even 12 baskets of bread left over. The crowds were fed. The crowds were satisfied. But with the Lord, he wastes nothing. Excuse me. So my thought to you this morning is, wherever there is a need, whenever you're in a crisis, give all you have to Jesus and let him do the rest. He can begin in you to bless others far more than you would ever know. You see, Jesus gives out of abundance. We just need to make ourselves available. We just need to offer ourselves and say, Father, Lord, this is all I am. This is all I have. Use it to your glory. Use it to bless others. You see, the crowds were hungry. They were probably hoping for a huge blessing of some kind. Then there is something about Jesus' blessing before the food, as I mentioned. He broke it, and then from that, there was this abundance of food. Wow, what a miracle. And with this I finish. In Ephesians 3 verse 20 it says, now to him who is able, that's Jesus, to him who is able to do immeasurably more than we can ever ask or imagine, according to his power that works within us. Jesus needs us as apprentices. He needs to work out of us to demonstrate his power, to demonstrate his blessing. We've got to make ourselves available. You know, Jesus is feeding the 5,000. It's a gentle reminder of our daily Christian lives, that nothing we face on earth is too big for our God. Our hope this morning should be found in Jesus and Jesus alone, because Jesus is big enough for any of our expectations. And he uses people, he uses people to bless others. And ultimately, this story, this miracle, ultimately it shows that Jesus had compassion for his people. And through this miracle this morning, we can be reassured of his love for us. Father, I know time is gone this morning and I've gone over, but Father, I just pray that you will help us to make ourselves available to you. Lord, that out of our gifts and our talents and all that we have, we bring it to you humbly this morning and say, Lord, use us this morning, we pray, to bless others. May we be a hope of blessing to others through you. So Father, we thank you and we ask for you to use us, for you to bless us. And we thank you for this wonderful miracle that shows us your true compassion, your true love for us and your people. Amen. God bless you and thank you for listening.